What in Germany, one of the issues that I think the SPD have, the governing centre-left party, is there are still wide swathes of that party and that movement that simply will not face up to the reality that immigration is a major concern for people. So we had a conversation with a strategist in a progressive think tank in Berlin, and she said, people think immigration is a concern, but actually it's schools and hospitals. And that's the attitude which will lead to the devastating defeat that they're likely to face next week. This government and the Labour Party are taking a different approach. We appreciate that this is top 3 concerns for all voters and number 1 concern for many voters that are going to decide the next election. So we have to answer those concerns head on.
But I suppose the argument then comes back from people like Diane Abbott, which is, well, frankly, go for the real Reform Party if that's what you're just going to encourage people to end up in the arms of reform if you embrace their policies like that.
Well, I just reject that argument. I think the idea that you ignore what people are telling you is very dangerous. And we're not going to do that. And look, it's not just because we want to win people's votes. It's actually the right thing to do. Levels of immigration are completely unsustainable at the moment in this country. There is a consensus about that across the political spectrum. It's now how you deal with it. And this government today, they're bringing forward legislation which is going to go some way towards that, but it's only a small step forwards, and there's a lot more that has to be done.
Is it the language of reform that you think needs to be shared as well? I mean, this idea of it's a sort of odd video, isn't it? 'Cause it sounds it's a sort of combination of sounding slightly violent and slightly sort of middle class in the same space. But do you think that reform is getting the language right on this? Is that what Labour wants to find?
Well, I think we have to understand how people's emotions. This isn't just a rational policy debate about numbers, about visas, about law enforcement. Of course that's important, and the bill today gets a lot of those details right, but we need to understand that people are worried and fearful and anxious by the fact that our borders seem completely uncontrolled, that we don't know who is arriving on our shores every day. That is a very scary and actually, frankly, completely unacceptable position to be in as a major country.
And some people...
I don't think some of that anger is shared by politicians enough. And people are angry about it. They think, frankly, people are taking the piss and that politicians haven't got a grip of it, and now we have to.
And some people were really, really angry, we'll remember, at what was happening last summer, and they felt so angry about immigration that they went to hotels and they tried to, in protest, set fire to hotels and burn migrants in their beds. So I guess what I'm asking is, at what point does Labour just accept the narrative that immigration is uniformly bad? And at what point do you go back and say, well, hang on a sec, we aren't going to be the Reform Party because Reform probably doesn't have a full stop anywhere on this. You know that.
Yeah.
So where does Labour find the muscularity, if you like, to say we can lead on this as well as listen?
Well, I think we have the massive benefit of being in government, so we can actually take action which hopefully will see results that then people will understand and trust that Labour get this issue and are dealing with it. Reform talk a lot, and there's a lot of bombastic talk, but I think that people recognise that some of that talk is simply unrealistic and is not going to work. One thing that I'm always struck with on the Rwanda plan, I don't want to go back to that, is that when you poll it, people say, we know this isn't going to work. But then you poll it again and say, do you support it? And they still support it because they just want someone to do something. And they feel that the governments of all different colours over a 20, 30-year period haven't got a grip of this issue. And I think that explains quite a lot of reform support at the moment, which is that people probably think, God, Nigel Farage, I don't really want him to be Prime Minister, but at least he's saying something. At least he has some ideas.
And you want to ape
pressure on.
that.
Well, we don't want to put we don't need to ape it. We need to deliver on it, because we have the benefit, as I said, of being in government. We're passing legislation today. We've actually have a very good record on deporting people who shouldn't be here since we've got to government, which we're beginning to communicate in some evocative and different ways, which I think is good and has to be done in this modern media age. And that's the answer for dealing with reform.
I think that one of the things that strikes me as well, just in policy terms, is why doesn't Labour embrace digital ID cards? Now, you can tell so much about you. Show me your ID card and you can see what their entitlement is. A lot of other countries have it as perfectly normal. Now, Blair has called for it, Blunkett has called for it, and I see you're now calling for it as well. Why isn't the Labour Party caught up?
Well, yeah, I've been calling for it for a long time, since the general election. For me, it's a really important policy development which will mean that we have better control of our borders, we can crack down on welfare fraud, it's better for crime prevention, but also public service reform in terms of patient passports, what's going on in the NHS. The reality is it is actually happening incrementally. So we've had an announcement that digital driving licence is going to be an outreach over the next few years. As I said, the NHS have got digital passports, e-visas in the Home Office. The Education Department have just announced new children's identifier for every child. But we need to bring it together, and we need it to be led right at the top of government as a national project over a 10-year period of what we call national renewal to rewire the relationship between the citizen and the state. I think it could be a pivotal part of it, and I'm calling for the government to do more and be more ambitious on it.
But you said at the start of this interview that the Labour Party is not like the SPD, where they're kind of talking just about hospitals and schools and not realising the Labour Party that you're a part of doesn't accept this either. The Labour Party as a whole is not for digital ID cards.
Well, let's see. As I say, I think there's a lot of work going on in this area. This week again, on Wednesday, the second reading of the Data Use and Access Bill. It's quite a dry piece of legislation, but it's actually making some really significant steps forward in this area. What I would do, and I've called for it today in an article in Huffington Post, is for someone in government, and someone pretty senior in government, to bring this together, to bring the public with us on this journey, because it's absolutely critical.
Well, Keir Starmer.
Well, yeah, the Prime Minister or Pat McFadden in the Cabinet Office. Well, because I think there is a lot going on in government, and there is a bandwidth, and there are certain things that you can lead on. I'm hoping that this is an agenda that the government will get a grip of and take forward, and I think they will. As you've said, this is happening across the world, and if we don't, then we're in danger of being left behind.
What about when you read Dominic Cummings' interview in the Sunday Times, where he says, look, the state has let you down. The state is responsible for so much that is crap in people's lives. Post office, blood scandal, Grenfell Tower, you name it. There are all kind of endless things you can point to where the state hasn't delivered, and you are in hock to civil servants who want the status quo, who want to keep things as they are. That is a critique from the right of British politics. I get a sense you share it.
Yeah, no, it's not a critique just of the right. It's a critique from the left, and that's absolutely critical to this. The Labour Party was created to be an insurgent on the institutions that are powerful, which are holding back power and wealth from those that also deserve it too. Where I think Dominic Cummings is right is the system is broken. We're talking about the rise of the far right across the Western world, and that is because the system, the economic model, the social fabric is broken and has failed people over a period of 20 or 30 years. So we need to go back to first principles on immigration, on the economy, on the health service, on education, to look at where we are as a country now, and not lean on a model which has failed people too much. And that's the radical change that people, I think, voted for back last summer, and this government has got to deliver on it. Now, it started doing that, but I do think we need to ask some more fundamental questions on all these issues.
It just feels that you need to have some backbone as well, Jake, in the sense that when Keir Starmer says, he invites his cabinet round to a 6-hour, off-site, whatever, and says we have to be the disruptors. I mean, there's something so sort of tragic about that, isn't it? You are the party of government. You have the levers. You have the budget. Rather than sort of trying to pretend to be the outsiders. Everyone can pretend to be the outsiders. Why don't you just embrace being where you are at the centre of power and say, we don't have to pretend to be disruptors. We just need to do it. And actually, if we push back on some of the false narratives with a bit more muscularity, we can convince people.
But I don't think it's just about being the outsiders. When you're in government, I don't think you can pretend to be an outsider. But what you can do is show a urgency and understanding that the current system is completely broken and that needs changing. And that, I think, when he talks about disrupting,
you'd end up saying nothing that we've done in government has worked, right? So if you fundamentally believe that you have to be the disruptor because everything that the civil service has done or all the scandals of the past have been terrible, then fundamentally you're saying we don't deserve to govern. We don't deserve to be the party of government. We've screwed things up.
Well, we've only been in power for 6-7 months, but it's still relatively early days.
Labour,
but I think there is a critique of how Whitehall is working, and I think that perhaps the Prime Minister, I've read the same news stories from the Cabinet meeting held last week, is finding that government isn't able to bring about the change as quickly as he would like, and that means that talking about rewiring how Whitehall works and the state works is really important. But I would also want us to go, as I said before, go back to first principles on all these big issues. Instead of tinkering at the sidelines and modest reforms here and there, we need to think about, on immigration, who do we want to come here and who do we not want to come here? On health, how are we going to fund our social care system over the next 20, 30, 40 years? These big questions have to be answered before we can then bring about the change that people really want.
So might Farage be right when he's suggesting that it is more something to do with insurance-based funding?
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.